Hi, and welcome to Black Men Speak. I am Katherine Robertson-Pilling, and this is a conversation with three men that I am privileged to call my friends: Cal Harris Jr., Allie Joseph, and Joshua Kamara. Cal Harris Jr. is a contemporary jazz artist with multiple hit singles, including two that made it to #1. As the son of a Grammy-nominated sound engineer, Calvin Harris Sr., Cal grew up wandering the halls of Motown studios in LA. He became a very sought-after engineer, programmer, and producer in his own right, working and touring the world with legendary musical icons like Earth, Wind and Fire, Lenny Kravitz, Prince, Whitney Houston, and Beyonce. He's released 3 successful CDs of his own and was ranked #4 in his genre by Billboard magazine for the year 2018. He was born in Los Angeles and currently lives in Phoenix, Arizona. I met Cal in 1995 in Los Angeles. For a few years, we were part of a personal growth group where we were all learning to break through our own limiting beliefs about ourselves, to speak our truth authentically and be heard and understood. We've been friends ever since, and Cal is one of the most prolific, creative men I know, confronting his own inner challenges to step out into the world and share his gift, which is equal in the technical magic as well as the creative spirit of making music. Allie Joseph is a priest in the Anglican Diocese of Johannesburg, South Africa. He was born and bred in the harsh landscape of the Northern Cape, and he's classically trained in philosophy and theology and believes in the power of human potential. As a child of the African soil, Allie has spent many years of his life working on 4 continents through the church, always reaching out to connect with the people he meets. I met Allie in the south of France on New Year's Eve, 2013. I had just returned from a short visit to his home country of South Africa, and I pestered him all night long over dinner to find out more of a place I had quickly fallen in love with. Allie and I had many conversations over the next year, and I've always appreciated his willingness to step out of his professional role and share his true thoughts and feelings with me. Cherish his friendship, and I hope to get to South Africa one day so we can work together. Joshua Kamara is a young entrepreneur who works in every stage of property investment. He has sourced more than 400 property deals, including a property my husband and I purchased and have operated since 2016. In the 4 years I've known Josh to be one of the brightest, most responsible, compassionate, and innovative young men I've ever known. He's developed his philosophy of life through a lifetime of high-level competitive sports. At the age of 16, when his father died, Josh began boxing. And through that process, the physical, mental discomfort motivated him to change his life, gave him the discipline, dedication, and determination to do so. Later this year, Josh will launch a lifelong dream, which he calls Achieve, a personal development program for youth, working outdoors in schools and in communities to teach lifestyle habits and mental conditioning through mental and physical exercise. We're here today to hear 3 different stories of what it's like to be a Black man in this world, what you have experienced, where you live, where you've traveled in the world. I'm going to invite you to introduce yourselves, but before I do that, I want to address the elephant in this room. And that is, why is a white woman leading this conversation? So I have a story to tell as well, which I will try to keep short here. I was born in Houston, Texas in 1956. When I was 3 years old, a Black woman came to our house named Mrs. Thelma Johnson. She took care of me while my parents went to work, and she was in our household for 17 years. She really did feel like a second mother to me. I knew something was different about the way she was treated, but I didn't know what. It was all I had ever known. It was my normal. In 1974, I went to university in Chicago, and over time, I saw the inequities in Texas more clearly because of how differently Blacks related to whites in the North. I wasn't yet willing or even able to question the system that created that difference, but I had a deep confused unease with what was so obviously embedded inequality and the injustices it caused. In the early 90s, my career in film and TV unfolded. I was assigned a series of projects that put me face to face with the racism and injustices in our system. I had a rare opportunity to spend a day inside Cook County Jail with a class of young men aged 15 to 17, mostly Black, who were awaiting trial, many of them in there for 2 years already. They were learning, however, under the guidance of a remarkable teacher, to look deeply into themselves and take responsibility for their actions. I interviewed 6 of them for my story. I looked into their eyes, and in that one day, I understood what no history lesson could ever have taught me. When I asked them, what can I do? They said to me, tell our stories. So long story short, when George Floyd was killed, I, like so many of us, began having difficult conversations with friends around the world to talk about this problem. I reached out to Josh, to Cal, to Allie, and a few more people who either didn't respond or declined to participate in this conversation today. I'm not an expert or a scholar. I may get something wrong here, but I know how to ask questions, I know how to listen, and I know a little something about telling stories. This is a time for taking risks, putting something on the line for what is right. For me, this conversation is about giving the microphone to real Black men to speak with each other and to be heard, to get behind the stereotypes that I grew up with, which I know in my own life experience are almost always false. It's an opportunity for the rest of us to lay down the mask we're projecting of what a Black man is and bear witness to who you really are. So here we go. I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourself in your own words and to share why you're here today. What inspired you to be part of this conversation? Allie, would you like to go first?
I'm here so that I could be part of a conversation. I come from a long line of violence and the whole culture of just stab first or like be abrasive first. So growing up, I've seen this. I've seen this terrible propensity for violence that my people have, and I make jokes about this. That like, you know, you can go with me into places other people couldn't, because people would regard me as dangerous. So I just want to be part of a conversation. And when I got this invitation to be part of this conversation, I thought it well that I could, you know, just share some insights and like share some of the things that I've experienced through my life. I'm no authority on racism or discrimination. All I know is that I've never been either white enough, Black enough, colored enough. There's always been this thing that I was always like viewed from where I was not enough. And so like I'm out there like making myself enough. Like I am enough, because after all that I've been through, all the life experience I've had, and I've lived and worked on 4 different continents. I know that people, when they see me, they are conflicted because they don't know what to make of me. And that has always said everything about the people who view me, because I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know what I stand for, because I didn't have a choice. I had to choose, you know, living, you know, people ask me, why did I become a priest? I tell them that like, when I was very young, I had to make a choice whether to go into a life of violence or a life of peace. I had to choose this. It came at a price. And I'm I'm not sorry for having chosen this life, because this life has brought me a wealth of experience and diverse experience. And so I'm grateful to be here, and I hope I can add value to this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Thanks for being here. Cal, you ready? Tell us.
Sure. I come to this forum as a Black man who was raised primarily in a white world. And I mean, you know, there's a lot of ways of looking at a white world, but when I say that, I mean, in the world that I grew up, everyone was white. There were very few Black people. And so my journey of figuring out what it means to be a Black man in America is ongoing, for one. And you know, I was listening to Ali speak there, and one thing that he said that I can really say really resonated with me was that not being Black enough and not being white enough is something that I've struggled with. And you know, being too Black for the white people in my life and being too white for the Black people in my life. And so this is doing something like this, you know, I found myself wondering, am I even qualified to speak on this? You know, have I had the experience, you know? And what I've come to find is that just being Black, no matter how you're being Black, is an experience in this world. And I have had the privilege to travel extensively, and I have realized that this is an issue all over the world. It manifests itself differently in different places, but there are some very strong commonalities of the perception of what a Black man is, what a Black man can be. I'm also very tall. I'm 6'6" and big, and so which, when you add to Black, means threat. And so a lot of my life, not even so much intentionally, but just as a method of survival, has been about understating my size and my stature and you know, trying to bridge that gap, you know, so that I don't seem so larger than life. And so just recently, I feel like I've been on a journey to reclaim some of that, you know, to find out, how can you be a man, how can you be powerful and still be Black in the world. And it's a struggle, but it's also an opportunity. And you know, once I've found that if I have an opportunity to speak to people, then they have an opportunity to know me. And that's why I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak my truth and to hear the truths of others. And it's especially great because I've been to these places, and I've seen the Black people there, but I haven't met a lot of them. And so it will be great for me to actually hear the Black experience from these different angles, and see what's common, what's different. And yeah, so I'm happy to be here, and I'm super thankful to you, Katherine, for putting this together. And I just want to say I feel like you belong here because I trust you and I've known you for years, and I know your heart is pure, and I know that we've done a lot of challenging work together, and I know you to be a courageous person with a pure heart. So I can't think of anyone better to do what we're doing here, to lead this. And as a white woman, I think you belong here because I believe that white people belong in this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here, and really look forward to seeing the three of you, hearing the three of you connect more deeply with each other. My great honor to facilitate this. So, Josh, I saw you nodding your head there.
Yeah.
Tell us about
so,
you and why you're here.
So I'm Joshua Kamara. I'm 30 years old, born and raised in Sheffield with Sierra Leonean heritage. Father of three, and I'm here today because I think it's so important to realize we're not alone. We go through this daily struggle, which has become normalized racism, which shouldn't be normal. And not only are we all here to say we're not alone, with you being here as well, Katherine, to highlight the fact that we're all part of the human race. And I feel that we've really been manipulated, divided, and we're starting to reconnect, to realign, and to provide a collective energy to really empower ourselves and demand, and I hope to force change. So I feel these conversations are so necessary, and I'm sure everyone here can relate. We've been talking about this, we've been carrying this for so long, but no one's been listening. And now is the time to really take, great pride in who we are, our culture, what we stand for, and to speak. I believe I'm a person who really believes that unexpressed emotions are just buried deeper. They never leave, they're just buried within us. And this has given us a platform, thanks to you, Katherine, to express ourselves. And if we don't do that, we bury them and it comes out in an uglier form. So I'd just like to thank you for giving us all this opportunity and to connect us all. And like Cal said, I know that your heart, your intentions are true, and it is so important for everyone here to be involved and to speak. So that's why I'm here.
No, thank you, Josh. I'm just thrilled to have you here too. I've been hearing a lot about the ineffectiveness of intentions lately, and I've had a lot of good intentions in my life, and many of them I never took action on. So for me, this is a rekindling of the willingness to act, as we all need. And I have to really honor George Floyd and his passing for igniting a movement that has been long, long overdue. So I want to ask you now, and we met yesterday for a little meet and greet, and there was a lot of laughter and a lot of exchange. So I just want to invite that into this conversation again too. But Cal, you raised a question that I think is really important, and I'd like to start with, which is, when was the first time you realized you were Black? And when did it really kick in for you what that meant? So whoever would like to go first on that, please jump in.
Well, my mom reminded me, because the death of George Floyd, it really brought an overwhelming sense of emotions, which I've been carrying subconsciously. And the global reaction just really brought a lot of emotions to surface. And I was questioning a lot of experiences I've had, a lot of relationships I have. And my mum reminded me from the age of 3, she said, Josh, you used to identify from the age of 3 that you're the only black person in the room, that did people feel you were adopted, you know, because you're here, because like Cal as well, I had a mixed heritage. So my mum's white, she's from Scotland originally. And I was so fortunate to have my mum because she was a very educated white woman and, you know, understood how important it was to educate me, to ensure that I was going back to Africa, West Africa from a very early age. And she really helped manage my expectations from a very early age. But it was from as early as the age of 3 for myself, being in a classroom in Sheffield with maybe just myself and another black guy in the other class. So we identify instantly. Then playing competitive sport from a very early age, from the age of 5, 6, that was my introduction to aggressive racism, playing football, athletics. So I understood very early that I was going to be seen as different, but it's also helped shape me from very early as well, because I realized it wasn't my problem.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you.
Well, I'm from South Africa, you know. We've institutionalized racism. We have like A grade racism. Like the rest of the world look up to us, like where racism is concerned. And growing up in South Africa as a colored boy, you know, looking back at where I started out, you know, it was always that the element that defined my life. It made me who I am today, and I've given it a lot of power over the years, because it took me away from my parents. Because for me to get an education, I had to go like 500 kilometers away from my house, from my mother's house, because there was no school, high school for colored boys, for colored people. And there was a school, there was a high school. I walked past it every day, but it was for white people. So it defined my life, because you know, since I was 13 years old, I have not been living at home. I'm 44 now, and since 13, I've never celebrated my parents' birthdays. I've never been home for Mother's Day. So when people talk about racism, I'm like, okay, we can have an academic conversation about this. We can like have a philosophical conversation about this, but like for me, it defined my life. And you know, in South Africa, living as a colored man, the racism has not stopped. You know, people ask me, like, Katherine and I, we had a discussion the other day about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I told her all about like Bishop Desmond Tutu and how nice a guy he is, and like how short he is. Like he's even shorter than me, and he even makes more inappropriate jokes than I do. And you know, he lives in the States most of the time. But like we share those things in common. But like what we do share in common is our love for humanity. Because like I've been given the privilege to work in China, in United States of America. I worked in Vienna, Austria, in France, in Monaco. You know, I had a very beautiful life up to now. But what I do carry with me is this thing that like we are not the same. My mother always, she made it a point. My mother gave birth to 4 sons. Every time she almost died, like her mother died in childbirth. She almost died with every child she gave birth to. And when we came out, when we were big enough to understand, she told us, "You are not the same. I don't love you the same." Uh, and so this, I'm not talking about non-racialism. I'm not talking about like color blindness. I'm talking about like this individual, you know, we are individuals. We should be treated as individuals. And I got this from a woman who never went to school. Like she went to grade 5. She doesn't have a, you know, any education to speak of, but she taught us that, you know, you are not the sum total of your experiences of where you come from. You are bigger. You are more. And today I buried you know, I had a memorial service for a woman, for a mother, and I spoke to people about like how we are made by 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 those who are instrumental in our lives. And in South Africa, I can tell you this. Now we are grappling with COVID-19, but COVID-19 is like showing the cracks in our social contract. Because more people in South Africa die every day because of poverty and because of like, you know, they're destitute. They don't have medical aid. They don't have medical insurance, and it comes down to race. So, um, you know, where I knew that I was different was when I went to hospital. My father was in the hospital, and there was a white man who came by and he said to my father, "What are you doing here?" I was like looking at this white man, like why? Well, my father is ill. He had an accident at work, and he said to my father, "You're at the right. You're at the wrong side of the hospital. You should be on the other side. This side is for whites." And then the white man went past and he was talking to another white man and said to the other white man, and this colored bushman has the nerve to have blue eyes. And like, I look at my mother like, but what's wrong with these people? My father didn't have a choice. He didn't have a say in which color eyes he has. But that's how the crudeness, the very the in you know the senselessness of racism and discrimination. And I've suffered this on 4 different continents. I've been called, you know, what are you? I've been called this like in China, in Atlanta, Georgia, in you name it, like you know, Chicago, wherever, like France, in Paris, in you know, in Barcelona. So it's not centered around like a country, like it's all over.
Thank you, Ali. Thanks. How
Well,
about you, Cal?
well, thank you for letting me go last, because it took me all of that time to remember what I said yesterday. But I think it's really difficult for me to find out when the first time I realized that I was Black, because I don't remember ever not being Black. But I think a really important aspect of this is, when did I realize what a difference it made? You know, in my first few years of being alive, and were actually pretty good, and I was pretty sheltered from the concept, and I wasn't really forced to deal with it right away, I guess. So probably, I do remember being in school and them showing like National Geographic type of films of African people in the, you know, in the jungle, naked, and you know, having other children in the school say, "Ooh, Calvin, is that your mom? Is that your, you know, is that your family? And is, you know, is that where you're from?" And really being, you know, ashamed at that moment. And you know, so that's where the difference cropped in. But I think well, I'll just say another significant moment was when a family that I lived near, I spent a lot of time with. Eventually, I saw a book sitting on their coffee table. This was a white Jewish family, and I saw a book sitting on their coffee table about the Ku Klux Klan. And I picked it up, and I'm like, "What's the?" You know, I couldn't even really pronounce it. And they were like, "You've never heard of the Ku Klux Klan?" And it's like, "Oh, well, you know, they hate black people, and they ride around with torches, and they kill people, and, you know, I mean," and I was stunned. I was like, that, you know, I thought they were kidding when they told me about this. And I was really struck by that. And then, of course, you know, there was the movie Roots and 100 other things. But I think a significant moment was in high school. I went from going to a private school to going to a public school, and which was the difference between maybe 100 people in the whole school and you know, probably thousands of people in one school, or at least maybe 1,000. I don't remember, but it seemed like millions, you know, compared to what I had seen. And this was right in the middle of busing, where they were busing the kids from the unfortunate black children were being allowed to come to the privileged white school that I naturally attended because I lived in that area. And so when those kids got off the bus and they saw me, they're like, "Well, wait a minute, we didn't see you on the bus. We're you know," and I was like, "Well, I live here." And from that moment on, I was despised by them. Despised for the way that I spoke. I was despised for the fact that I lived where I lived, and it was daily, and it just happened to coincide with my first real growth spurt, where I went from being a somewhat chubby little boy to the tallest person in the school in a matter of months. I was the tallest person in the school. And so I really had this experience of being alienated from everyone because I was so much bigger than you know, by the people, than everybody really. But especially my white counterparts, and of course they were having an experience of having all these black kids now in the school, and you know, so they started looking at me differently based on the fact that they had so many different these new people in the school. So I really felt isolated by that experience, and it was the first time that I really felt hatred on a continuing basis from my own people. And that, you know, I mean, I never went to prom. I never participated in anything that was going on in the school. That's you know, I actually had a scholarship offered to me to a school that you know, could have, you know, really been a great school for me to go to for music and whatnot. And I was so preoccupied with who I was finding out that I was in school that I mean, plus I was a teenager and irresponsible and smoking weed and, you know, but I completely blew that and just barely graduated from high school. And that was kind of, I guess you could, you know, there's all these little beginnings of when it's, you know, new phases of my Black experience. But I think the final thing that I want to mention is my first time visiting your country, Ali, in South Africa. And it was, by then, it was a Black country, you know, after the Truth and Reconciliation process, and everything had basically been turned back over to the native people of South Africa. And so when I arrived at the airport, the customs people were Black, the police were Black, and I thought that was interesting. But the thing that really struck me was that I wasn't anymore. When I walked into a store, nobody noticed. You know, when I walked into the hotel, nobody even raised their head to say, "Oh, who's that?" You know, I belonged there, and that was an amazing experience because it really made it clear to me how much I don't belong here. And I have not belonged in more countries than you know I can remember, and you know, it's different in every little country in a different little way, but it's always there. It's always there, and you know, there's always this, because of my size and color, there's always this fear. So going to South Africa was the first time that I didn't have that experience. It's a better word for it. I can't think of it right now, but and that really shined the light on the experience that I've been having, which to varying degrees I didn't really acknowledge. You know, I've always prided myself on how well I could fit into the world, and you know, you talk about the George Floyd incident where, you know, he was murdered on live television. That's the kind of situation that I always prided myself on, is that I would never end up in that situation because I know how to talk to the police. I know how to deal with them. I speak their language, and there's truth to that. I mean, you know, if I'm pulled over, I can defuse the situation almost instantly, just because I can speak to them in a way that makes them feel comfortable. And up until George Floyd, I really prided myself on my ability to do that. And watching that 8 minutes and 46 seconds made it clear to me that no one should have to be that good at that. And it's great that I have that survival ability, and you know, but you know, I have a pretty unique experience, and I shouldn't have to do that, and no one should have to be that good just to stop themselves from being killed. And that was the first time that it was that clear to me, and I think to the world. And so it really feels like this is a portal and an opening where we can get into this in a way that maybe we never have to go this far back again. You know, I don't know that we can get it all done now, but I just hope that we can get to a portion we never have to at least come back as far as low as that moment was for all of us as a human race. That was a low point. And yeah, I guess that's what I have to say.
Hitting bottom as a society, I hope.
Yeah.
Josh, you look like you're bursting.
I could relate so much to what Carl was saying, and I just wanted to highlight the consequential layers and the impact racism has on us. Just listening to your story, which I can relate to, and what we have to understand is racism is a business, and what every business needs, it needs good PR, good marketing, good advertising. And the experiences that you went through, Cal, you know, for you to have to the amount of energy you're having to constantly have drained from you to try and make other people feel comfortable is something which, you know, the media, how the stories portray big black thugs, and you know, even back to the days of King Kong, a big black, you know, creature, beast. And if you look at a lot of the early television programs, we were beastly, you know, we were like animals. And for you, Carl, to have to take that on as a responsibility and how it could have redirected your life in such a negative way is really, that's not your responsibility. And it's really sad when you hear those stories. And that is a consequence of racism, which unfortunately a lot of people, they don't get to understand or hear these experiences. They think we're just playing the black card, but what Cal's had to experience is a consequence of the institutional racism. And it's what I've had to face, you know, to a point where I have to do the same. I have to try and come across less intimidating, change the tone of my voice. I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. And it's because I'm fighting against a massive organization. And we have, unfortunately, the politicians in with the corporations that we always have. And racism is a business. And it's been the best marketing campaign ever. So I was just bursting to say I could relate to Cal. And also what he said, because my dad was a Sierra Leonean black man that came to England in the 50s, where they would get chased, they would get, you know, there'd be gangs waiting outside for them where they worked. They had to run for their life. They had to form a community just to walk the streets. And my dad always used to say all the hardship he went through. He always used to say to me, Josh, if you get stopped by the police, smile, relax, be you know, play the game. And that shouldn't be our responsibility to do that. So I just wanted to reach out to Cal so I can relate to you in that sense. And these are the layers that people don't really see and understand, which we have to live with every day.
Yeah, I'd say that. Thank you for that. I am, you know, just starting to realize or I realize more and more as time goes on, the cost that has, and a lot of the costs are unseen. You know, in my art, you know, there is just I start with not being good enough. That's my starting point. And I, you know, now that I'm working on my 4th CD, I'm realizing that is a constant element, is just trying to talk myself down from that ledge of you don't belong here, you don't deserve this, you don't really have this coming. And it's not like I'm consciously thinking that, it's just a sense. and it's fueled by the energy that I have to put into not being what I would be if there were no people around or any cameras or anything like that. If I can't be that person, then every minute I spend, and I like the way you put that, because I had not quite put it that way before, and not quite seen it that way before, but I'm beginning to, and I think conversations like this are super helpful towards that end.
Definitely.
Cal, may I share the full force story? How I used to say, well, I'm going to be bold. When I first met Cal back in 1995, and we were going to this group together, you know, here came this large Black man who I came to experience as the gentlest, most beautiful-hearted human being. And I can remember feeling, and I used to say to you, I want the full force of Cal Harris. And I had no idea really until recently why you could not live from that place. I had no idea. And this is what we're talking about, this embedded sense of I must contain and keep close and small my force. Yes. Otherwise, I'm a threat. I'm perceived as a threat to the world.
Yes. I don't know, I'm hijacking the conversation, but like.
No, you're not, go in.
It's like, I have, you know, I have a extensive circle of friends. And sometimes like the conversation goes cold when I go like, I'm a racist. And like, what? Did he just mention the word racist? I say, yes. I'm just like, you know, I'm just keeping it real, guys. I'm like, I'm a racist. I not by choice, not by design, but by necessity. Because like white people came to me when I was 12 years old, and they clobbered me with like sticks and stones, and like they made me hate them. So you know, I was crawling on the floor like don't kill me, don't save my life, please, because like so growing up like that, you know, it's like you have to constantly, like, personally for me, I have to check myself, because you know I used to hate white people to the point where like it was irrational. I was like I heard when they spoke to me, it was always negative. It was always like I was always combative. I was always like aggressive, and for all they took from me, I was always like, "Rah!" And I was like always like I used to puff myself up and like go, you know, face them, and like because like just to show to them like I'm not afraid of you, because yes, they made me, you know, feel so inferior to them that I had to choose as a colored man. I had to choose. I will not be, you know, I will not be beaten again by white people. So when I speak to my white friends, I tell them like, guys, like I've grown so much over the years. I've achieved so much, like personally, you know, growing into my skin, growing into my, you know, who I am, and like understanding where I'm from. And so, but like, yes, guys, I am racist. I am. And you know, I you know, individually, you know, you vet, you know, like I can't help it, because it's like something that I didn't choose to be like this. I had to grow into taking people at face value, because like when I went to school, I didn't want to be in a colored school. I wanted to be in a school where I could have the best opportunities like I could kid, but I wasn't allowed that because there was the white school, there was the black school, there was a colored school, the colored school. There was like this, the Indian school. When I went to the Indian school, I was discriminated against because I was not Indian. I was one of 10 coloreds at an Indian school. And, you know, living this whole segregation was like, it was just like, guys, please, I just need to be myself now. I just need to like have a concept of who I am. And so when the church decided to send me to like places like India, like 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 Wilmington, Delaware, like Monaco, like like Vienna, Austria, I, I was confronted with myself. I had all these people who didn't know me, and I had to like decide like who am I gonna be? Who am I? And many people don't have that. Like people that grew up where I was born, they never saw the inside of a plane. I saw the inside of 1,000 planes, and I'm privileged in that way. But I'm saying to the world out there that you know we do not have to be limited by this racist, this concept that like stay in your lane, like I'm better than you, play your part. Like we can all just be. Yeah.
It raises for me the question that you mentioned to me, Josh, because you were talking about your sons and the differences in their skin tones, and that each of them would likely have a different experience in their life. And you were coming to a point where you're going to have the conversation. And I've heard it called the talk. This conversation that I guess fathers and mothers have with their children about what it means to be of your skin tone in this world. And I wondered if you could say a little bit about what you remember of that conversation when you were a child, and the kind of conversation you'd like to have with your children today.
Yeah, I'd the dynamics in racism, and like I keep saying, the layers. It's, even between Africans, either we're joking about jollof rice or we're joking about, different skin pigmentation. Even with my Jamaican friends, between Jamaican and African, there's so many layers of discrimination and racism. And the conversations, so my dad, as a proud Sierra Leonean man, he was more concerned about Nigerians than white people. So his talks were always about Nigerians opposed to white people. With white people, I think he very early on, he was a very balanced individual. He understood the game. He understood there was a game. He understood it had to be played, and he always used to say to me, "Be a gentleman." In any scenario, be a gentleman. He says, we're all classified. As soon as you step into a room, we naturally classify people. You'll be identified as black, big, X, Y, and Z. So be a gentleman, sonicate an open and fluent energy. So apart from talking about Nigerians, when he came onto white people, it was more play the game and understand there's a game to be played. With my mom, again, as a white woman, I've had a very unique experience because she was a white woman who got with a black man in the 50s, and to the point where her mom and dad couldn't understand that. They come from, a time where, the World War, it was very white. Churchill, who actually played a part in South Africa and the apartheid in separating, they came from that era. So they couldn't relate to change. And when the 60s and the TV and Jimi Hendrix was there and the Beatles and they're wearing these tight clothes, like they couldn't comprehend. So my mom always rebelled against that, and she was a bit of a, she was one for the people, women's rights, very an activist, and she doesn't regard herself. I mean, she always used to say to me, with white people, Josh, unfortunately, on the surface level, everything can be okay. But whenever you get into a conversation about politics or go beneath the surface, there can be some very, very ugly truths. So she's always managed my expectations, and I think she's learned along the way. I don't think she understood the impact of having a black son. Although she was very educated, the experiences we've gone through, like experience with the police, the experiences with in football where she's had to drag me off football fields, where I've been sent off for reacting to being called X, Y, and Z, and we're in a housing estate where there's no black people in South Yorkshire, and I'm having to get pulled away for my own safety. So she's experienced so much having a black son, but I'm just so grateful for her approach and how she's educated. And I went to a very multicultural school. Somali, African, Caribbean, Chinese, Asian, white. It was such a multicultural school, and I've been all over the country, all over the world, and I'm just very fortunate to have had my expectations managed and to be supported whenever I've received racism. But I do remember from the age of about, with my dad, obviously just growing up with my mom, with my dad passing, I've been the man of the house for forever. So I do remember instances where I've had, quite aggressive encounters with the police through no connection with my own behavior, where I've had to handle that. My mom's not really understood how to process the situation. So from a very early age, and I think it's very important for black people and mixed race people, especially with being mixed race, you're not accepted by black people at the time, and you're not accepted by white people. So the only place you can go is inside. You have to internalize and be very comfortable with yourself before anything else. Otherwise, you're going to be a mess. And just going back as well, from going to Ghana from an early age in West Africa, I'm coming from Sheffield as a black man in my head. I'm going over to Ghana and you shout, "Oh brony," which means white person. And I remember thinking, I'm black. What? And they're seeing me as white. So this comes back. What I'm trying to say is, I think the only place you have to go is internalize. You have to accept yourself, love yourself, be comfortable with yourself, which is a journey, which is not easy at all. I'm saying it like it's not easy. But the talk I want with my kids is to be, before color, the soul has no color. So I want them to, I'm a big believer in self-development, mindset, physical education, and education as well. So every Sunday we have like Pan-African topics which are discussed, and there are only 5. My eldest is 12, and I just educate them. I want them to speak freely. I want them to have that relationship with me where they can be themselves, and I'm not trying to push them into any which way direction. So before we talk about race, I want to talk about identity and provide an environment where they can be themselves, first of all, because I think that will put them on a foundation to be able to deal with all the other dynamics of life, racism, sexism, all the other ugliness and harsh realities in life. So for me, it's just a very open, working on mindset, like I said, and having the conversations regularly. We don't sweep under the carpet in this house. We talk about it.
Oh, good. Cal, I know you have kids too, and maybe a little bit older than 5. But what do you recall about that talk in your life, and even with your children, if you've had that?
Well, as I think about your question, I have 2 daughters, and I'm realizing that I've never really had that talk with them, and it reminds me how specifically a black male issue
Mm.
this is, you know. And that's not to say that Black women don't have challenges in arguably even in more areas, but as far as dealing with the police, it's definitely at least from my experience, you know, being a Black male puts you at great risk. And of course, now recently you see that being a Black female has its risks as well. And but you know, just if I'm talking about my specific experience, you know, it's interesting. I was never sat down and given a specific talk. You know, like everything was normal, and then today we're going to have the talk.
Right.
The family that I came from really valued you know, how you presented yourself, and presenting yourself in such a way that whites didn't have as much to grab onto about you. You know, I mean, you can't not be Black, but you don't have to sound unintelligent, and you don't have to be aggressive. You know, you don't have to live up to the stereotypes that they have about you. And you know, like I said earlier, I've always considered that to be valuable information that I was given, but I'm also really aware that that's not a talk that I should have had to have. That's not a training that I should have had to go through. And it's tricky because, you know, a lot of the advantages that I've had in my life, I can attribute to my ability to fit in, you know. But as good at it as I may think I am, it's striking how little it matters in some cases, you know. And you know, I grew up walking home from school. I was stopped constantly by the police, by the private security companies that we were paying to protect our home. were always stopping me as a threat, you know. And I've been pulled over by the police, had guns pulled on me. You know, and it's great that I can talk to them and I can tell them my address and that I actually live there, you know. But having to do that is just a terrible condition, you know, for this world. And it has created a gulf between people who in reality are all parts of one body. We're all part of the human race, and these things that separate us as separate parts of and turn us into separate parts of the human race make the value that we are to each other less accessible, and in some cases inaccessible. And yeah, you know, when the colonial approach, when white people went into countries to take them over or to colonize them, or however you want to put it, often included separating one group of people from another, of the you know, the indigenous people. You know, you see that with the Hutus and the Tutsis. And in South Africa, I was just really amazed when I went to the museum that they have there, that just really shows like the different ID cards and the different neighborhoods and the caste system that they made of all these this rainbow of people, you know, and how it was separated. And eventually that takes on a life of its own. And, you know, I would have to say that the majority of racism that I've experienced has been from other Black people, you know, because I was too dark, you know, or because I didn't speak like the other people around me spoke, or, you know, if you have any advantages, you know, those become disadvantages in a lot of areas. You know, if you have money, that's considered bad. If you have an education, you know, that can be considered bad. That can be used against you. And so, you know, I spoke about how I have to present myself to white people and the energy that that takes, but there's just as much, if not more, energy that has to go into making sure that I present myself properly to Blacks, and that I don't appear to you know, that you know, it's not just physical intimidation that we're talking about. There's an intimidation that comes from your intelligence and from your money and from your station in life and the fact that you've traveled, or, you know, how you look, what's your grade of hair, are you mixed, are you light skinned, are you dark skinned, you know, all of those things. And you know, it starts with that, with the colonization thing, and you now have all these people who are clamoring for an edge, you know, to be most highly favored to the colonizers. And you know, so the talk for me was more like day-to-day training. You know, you don't say this word, you know, tuck in your butt when you walk. I remember my grandmother telling me. And you know, just a plethora of different things that I was being advised daily. Don't do this, don't do that, make sure you do this. And it's just, I really wonder what I could do with that energy if I weren't using it on that, and what we could all do with that energy that we're putting towards, you know, either segregating ourselves from the people we don't understand, or learning how to deal with them, or you know, one of the most painful things for me, having a lot of white people that I love and care about, is watching them stumble over themselves to not say the wrong thing. You know, people that I know are good people, you know, I already know that they're good people, so I don't really need evidence. And yet there's a standard that if you accidentally say or do the wrong thing, then you'll be branded. So now there's another level of separation, and that separates all of us from each other. And you know, I applaud your courage, Ali, for saying that, you know, we're all racists, you know. And well, I guess you didn't say we were all racist, I said that, but you owned your part in it, so thank you. But I feel like I have to own my part of that as well. And you know, I mean, I think some of that is natural. You know, it's human to find the fastest way to know what the dangers are in a situation. And so if you can look at somebody and label them instantly and know, okay, that's what a dangerous person looks like. That's what a nice person looks like. That's what beauty looks like, you know, and that just makes life a lot simpler. But at least it does in the short term. But in the long term, it complicates it and separates us. So, yeah, I think that if I were to have more kids and I wanted to have the talk with them, I mean, obviously I would love for there not to be a talk. But
Mm. Mm.
you know, I would want to be realistic and let them know that, you know, the dangers that they're faced. But I'd also want to let them know that it's difficult. It shouldn't be this way, but there are ways to deal with it that can make you stronger. You know, you know, finding your way through a challenge will always make you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Very well said. Very well said.
Mm.
thank you.
Um, I just wanted to say that, like, the difficult conversation to have is that there's white privilege. There's the white privilege is something that we need to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I also need to highlight the fact that there's also, like both, like most of us said, there's discrimination amongst Black people. So in the end, I think the conversation needs to be had is about, why is it that we need to be different, that we need to highlight difference. uh, we are different by design. The you know, you can choose your creator, but the creator has made us different, and there's nothing wrong with being different.
Mm.
the 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 problem for me comes in when people say that it's your difference is wrong.
Mm.
Because I've shared my life with, you know, I go to Friday evening prayers with Muslims. I have friends who don't believe in anything. I have Taoist, I have Zen, Buddhist, I have, you know, you name it. I, but I always tell them, like, can we coexist?
Mm.
Can we? Because what it all boils down to is that like, there's no getting away from the fact that we are different. You the Ghanaians and the Nigerians will have their issues. The South Africans and the Nigerians will have their issues. But what I'm saying is, like, why is it that, you know, we vilify this difference? There's nothing wrong. We are different by design.
Mm.
And sometimes people who know me, they would tell you that, like, Ali is, like, really awkward. He's socially maladjusted. He's like, he comes across as, like, you know, he's like really crazy at times, because I cannot seem to understand. I can't bring, you know, seem to bring, like, the first time I went to England, I stood there with this white guy next to me, like this old 90-year-old white guy. I was going through the passport control, going into London. And this one guy is looking at me like, I said to him, no, wait. Here's my passport. I'm a South African citizen. I don't need a visa to go to London. It's fine. Just stamp it for me, please. Because, like, why?
Mm.
Why should you being different being equal to being wrong?
Mm.
It's like, you know, in my own country, I look at people and I say to them, like, we are different, man. Let's just sit down, like, realize that there's too much stress to be the same. Like 20 years ago, I was a student. I put up my hand, like, at the back, like I was like,
Mm.
because the professor in the front was like saying that we're all the same. I stood up like, hey, we're not all the same. We don't have to be the same. We just need to, like, agree, like, we are not the same, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Mhm.
Going back to my mother's theory that, like, you don't have to be the same. You can be different, but you can be completely you being different. And like many people have asked me about, what's happening in the world now with what's happened, especially in the United States. And when they talk to me about it, I said, once, like in I think 2005, 6 or 7, there was a bridge collapse in Minneapolis, and I was in Milwaukee, and my mother saw the bridge collapse on the news, and she was like in a state, and she called a friend of mine to call me in the States, like to just find out if I'm. I said to her, ma'am, I'm completely fine. I'm good.
Mm.
People passed away, but like I'm good. Like now I'm saying that, like, yes, people die because of racism, but like we are still good. People die of COVID-19. We still good. The real problem is, are we going to allow ourselves to be? Because racism will survive COVID-19. People who have means, 9 out of 10 times there will be white people, but people who have means will survive. The poor who are colored, black, like, they will not survive because they can't go to the right hospitals in South Africa. I'm talking South Africa. So I'm saying that, like, let's have a conversation about racism and about the very bad effects it has on people. Like, in 2005, I divorced myself from the ANC government. I said to myself, I stood up at a very public meeting, and I said to the ANC government officials, I am divorcing myself from you today because of the fact that you've lost your soul. You're no longer looking out for the South African people. You're just enriching yourself.
Mm.
And now I'm still asking, can we at least have a talk about racism? Can we talk about discrimination? Can we talk about the all the deaths that is as a result of people not getting treatment because they are not white or they don't have money?
Mm.
Because in South Africa, people will tell you, no, South Africa is like, everybody, the black people got the vote, blah, blah. But don't be fooled. In here, it's about, like, those who have the means and those who don't have.
Yes.
So an honest conversation for me is me saying, yes, I am racist, because people force me to hate white people.
Mm.
But, like, I'm willing to come to a table where we will sit around and we will talk about, like, how we are different and how we are the same.
I appreciate so much this level of the conversation, because I think often about nature and the fact that nature, life is nothing if not diversity.
Yes. Yes.
And nature loves and requires diversity, even in crops, to survive. And our addiction to making people we don't understand wrong is, to me, it's a kind of fundamentalism. And we are so fearful of not knowing, and so attached to having answers and knowing everything so that we can maintain our illusion of control over life, that we will demonize anybody that we don't understand, or anybody who is even not like us. But the richness of conversation, of people who see things differently, the expression of the different facets of the truth, is the only thing that will help us know the whole truth, without needing someone that we you know, make greater than us to tell us what it is. Because as I've been hearing each of you say, that act of going within and really knowing ourselves and knowing what is true for me is crucial to living, but it's also crucial to the survival of our species. So I know that we are like well into this conversation now. I think we're close to 90 minutes. And I had proposed this as an opportunity for you to ask questions of each other as well. So I want to give you that opportunity if there's something that you want to pose or particularly say to each other that doesn't come from a question from me. I have lots more questions if you don't.
Well, I don't know if this is a question or an observation. You know, growing up as an American Black man, I have always looked at English Blacks as superior because they sounded English, you know, and in the United States, everything English is supposedly cool, you know, you know, and there's just like a properness to it. And since propriety was the cornerstone of how I was trained, you know, when I saw properness, you know, so I guess it's just interesting that from my perspective as an American, being the way that Black people talk in England sounds a lot like white people talk in England, and so there's like I just wonder if, I guess it's a question, can you tell the difference, Josh? When I mean, if you're talking to a Black English person on the phone, can you, and does it matter? Is it a thing? And
what I'd say in England is they'll stab you with a smile. So you have this whole kind of great face. This is not predominantly how I speak. This is something that I've adapted when I'm speaking in an environment with people new, or I'm speaking in a corporate environment. The way I speak to my brother, I mean, we speak Creole, which is Sierra Leonean language, and also slang as well, like UK slang. If you listen to a lot of the music, you'll pick up from the UK music scene. So this is something, again, sadly, which I've adopted when speaking in these type of forums or speaking on a day-to-day basis. But there definitely is a distinction in England, and it gets picked up on, and it gets discriminated, it gets frowned upon straight away. If I was to speak how I speak a lot of the time with my brothers or sisters or friends, you know, in a corporate environment, you straight away get, you know, you don't get taken seriously.
yeah,
You know, there's the jokes that follow. There's them trying to then impersonate that impression, which gets very awkward and very frustrating. So yeah. I would definitely say when you're in England, there is a way of speaking, but I think we've all had to adopt this, and I think I've heard many people speak about this, especially when you're Black and you work in a corporate industry as well. You very have that ability to be able to switch it on, switch it off, and adapt to different situations. So yeah, in England we do come across better. A lot of us say, like I used to say, especially with my extended family's grandma, who's Jamaican, she speaks patois, she speaks posh English. Depends who she answers the phone to. You know, it depends who she answers the phone to, but you just have to keep on being fluent. But there is a difference, but don't be fooled by, I think the British, we have this kind of sense that we're inferior and we come across nice. But for me, England, it's a very ugly place, and it drains a lot of energy for me to be here. When I'm in different countries, especially in West Africa, I feel at home, the energy is different, and the way I speak is different. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, that I mean, it's very similar in the United States, you know. Although it seems like, from my experience, it seems that in the UK, it's more widely adapted
Yeah,
amongst, you know, that just about every Black person that I met there knows how to speak
Mm.
and the Queen's English, I guess you could call it.
yeah,
And
Mm.
and I guess you start to see it more. You're starting to see it more in the U.S. as well. But you know, for me, it was almost the opposite. I had to learn how to speak when I was around Black people, so that I didn't get beaten up for, you know, if you don't have a certain kind of, you know, job. You know, some people tease me and tell me that I'm not as good at it as I think, but
it's interesting you say that, Cal, as well, because for me, when I was 13, I grew up in quite a rough area until the age of 13. And when we moved at 13, we moved to a predominantly white, a nice area. So instantly, it was very interesting for me. I've seen both, like my mum came from poverty and did very well for herself. My dad also. Like I said, I've been on such a mix of people. I can go into a boardroom and close £1 million deal. I can speak to a homeless person and relate to him. So I can relate on those levels. And for me, when I moved to an area in Sheffield, which was seen as a predominantly wealthy area, I wasn't accepted in that area. There was the twitching curtain. There was the even the comments to my mom, like how you know, neighbors would ask like, what's the setup? They were very speculative to how we've got a house there. And then instantly at school, so the people I've been to primary school with, like I said, I went to a primary school in a quite socially deprived area. But when I went to secondary school and people were like, oh, you're from that area in Sheffield, it was interesting. People instantly thought mom, dad, cat, dog, happy family, when really I was from a broken home. And you know, my mum had done very well to get to that position. And the way that people then perceived me was completely different. And it got me into a lot of negative situations, me trying to prove myself like, I'm not who you think I am. So it put me into a lot of negative, unnecessary situations. And I had a lot of anger towards my mum for a long time for putting me in that environment. So that was something I had to work out of, which I think only recently, only in the last few years, I've kind of accepted and been able to process properly. So it's interesting you say that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, the more this conversation goes on, each time I hear someone speak, I learn something. You know, I either learn something or it validates something in my experience. You know, because I have that as well. I've lived in different environments, you know, and you know, my dad did do very well, and yet, you know, we were in some, you know, some pretty compromising positions at times as well. So you know, we had challenges. They may not have been the same challenges, but I just know I'll tell, I can make my point with a story. I had an aunt who was a bus driver, and I come from a broken home too, I guess you could say, and my mother, I lived with my mother, and you know, my father lived this great Hollywood producer, engineer with stars kind of life, and my mother, you know, my mother is handicapped, and she's an amputee, and you know, so that kind of puts you in a category there, and we were always seen by the church as poor, and they, you know, they would bring by at Christmas time, they would bring by food baskets for us, you know, because they just assumed that because my mother was handicapped, that you know, that we didn't have enough to eat, and they bought us Christmas presents and and you know, a lot of stuff like that. And so I had an aunt who was, well, the greatest thing for us was getting to go see my dad. And to go see my dad, we had to take the bus from where we lived to where he lived. And but we didn't always have money to do that. You know, there have been times where we would spend an hour going through couch cushions and you know, looking behind corners trying to get the 95 cents together for a bus ticket to go see my dad. And so my aunt eventually got a job as a bus driver. And so at Christmas time, she presented my cousins who were, you know, they were living more of a typical, I guess, Black existence, you know, and their dad wasn't my dad. So she presented them all with bus passes that would allow them to take the bus anywhere they wanted to in the city. And I was there like, well, you know, where's mine? And they're just like, well, you don't need one. And these are relatives, you know, and so, you know, it's the race thing can really be an obstacle to knowing what someone's actual experience is.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Anything else you want to share with each other? You know, we're getting long now, and but before I sort of turn the direction slightly, I wanted to. So I have a question, which I gave you all the questions in advance, and I have a lot more questions, which I'm not going to be able to ask today. But one that I would like to ask you is, what message would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now about life and about yourself?
Don't believe that you're not good enough.
Yeah, I guess I would say, don't let the world around you define you. You know, if I, you know, I mean, I could probably write myself a book, but I think that would be the underlying, you know, the underlying.
Yeah, I would quite align with you guys. I would say don't let your given labels be your limitations, and to have the confidence to be yourself, because that is something that I can say that I've struggled with at times, to be Black and unapologetic. So yeah, I'd say have the confidence to be who you are.
Super. And then, you know, my last question.
I don't.
What is your 1-minute message to the world?
Don't get drawn into the lies and find yourself among and you know, despite all the noise, and be yourself, despite and amidst all the confusion, and take time to articulate what you feel.
Thank you, Ellie.
I would say to be very conscious that a lot of the life we live is not organic, and it is socially engineered, and we need to unplug from the mainstream narrative And aligned with what's happening now, the protests and the response, I think it was very inevitable. I think it's been effective, necessary, and I think it's a great way in unifying us all, highlighting the issues. But we've got to now, as people, create sustainable measures. We've got to understand why this is happening, and us as Black people, we've got to recreate, because we had it, recreate economic consequences in this world. So we really need to put a big emphasis in growth and wealth building in the Black community, because I feel that our culture is very accepted, but we as people are not.
Thank you, Josh.
You know, I'm trying to figure out how to put this into a 1 minute. I have a lot of little things that I could say, but I think that my message would be: if you look for love, you'll find it. If you look for anger, or if you look for discord, you will find that as well. And I believe that we can make a lot of changes just by being cognizant of how much our expectations play into our experiences. And that's the real sad thing that racism does. One of them is that it causes you to look for things that aren't there, and then to find them, you know, and they're, you know, are they there because they're just there, or are they there because that's what you expected to find? And when you find what you expect to find because of your prejudices, never forget what you overlooked, you know, because I mean, if you're looking for an angry Black man, you'll find him. There's plenty, but you will probably overlook 10 that aren't, you know, in your effort to find what you expected to find. And that's universal. I mean, if you're looking for prejudiced white people, you will find them, and white people who don't care what we're going through. But if you look for people who do, then you'll find Katherine. And many, many others that are out there. And I think that if we can all get together, then we can really make a change.
Thank you, Cal. Ah, what a rich conversation. I hope it is one that is, well, it's clearly not finished, but I hope it's one that we can continue, the four of us. And
yeah, when's the next one?
Well, stay tuned, as they say. I want to acknowledge that we're recording this on June 19th, known in the US as Juneteenth. And I just want to say that in 1865, this is the day that the Union General Gordon Granger led federal troops into Galveston, Texas, to announce that the Civil War had ended and slaves had been freed. It was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So there were there were in Texas 250,000 slaves who didn't know they had been emancipated. There was dancing, there was singing in the streets, but there were also many slaves who were not told and were not freed, that the harvest had to be completed and their masters kept them working. And even when they were told and went to leave their whatever you want to call it, plantations, there were many of them who were killed, and they never got to experience that freedom. So we have come a long way, but there are still deep, deep issues embedded in our societies and in our system that have not gone away. And, you know, even the 13th Amendment, the transition from slavery to criminalization is another whole conversation we could have. But for today, I really want to thank each of you from the bottom of my heart for honoring me enough to be willing to come together and engage in this conversation, for trusting me to organize this, and for being who you are in the world and who I know you to be. I believe that it is each of the people who have watched this program to the end that become part of this conversation, and we can include in this circle. And it's each of those people, it's each of you watching, doing what you know how to do, taking the risks in your life for what you know is right, that will turn the momentum of this movement into lasting change. So I take a stand to participate in that process with you, Ali, and you, Josh, and you, Cal, and for anybody else who wants to join us in that. Thank you so much for being here today and being part of this. And stay tuned. I'm sure there will be something else coming down the road. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
Pleasure.